just like before. I'm Mike Dekema, and today's date is November 5th, 2013, and we are here in what town, Mississippi?
Corinth, Mississippi. Alcorn County.
Alcorn County, Mississippi.
Right.
And tell me your name.
I'm Joy Dale Rhodes.
And were you born here?
I was born in the county, Alcorn County, in the western part of the county.
Mm-hmm. So, and have you lived here all your life?
I've lived here practically all my life except 2 years when I was in college, and then my husband was in the Marine Corps for 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then we moved back here.
You moved back home?
We moved back home.
Tell me about your family, your people.
My people. Well, I'm a school teacher, a retired school teacher. My mother was a retired school teacher. My grandmother taught school.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother and granddaddy went to Kossuth High School. Then it was Alcorn Agricultural High School.
Mm-hmm.
They boarded in the dormitories there. And my grandmother sewed for the superintendent's wife.
Mm-hmm.
And then my granddaddy, the boys raised cotton, corn. They had cows to milk. It was just like a regular farm, and that's what they did when they were in school. And then those were my grandparents' Brooks. And then, of course, all of my mother's family went to Kossuth High School, and my daddy went to the same high school, and then my husband and I graduated from the same high school, and then my children all graduated from there, and I have be 6 grandchildren will graduate from the same school.
And did you teach at that school?
I did. Taught in elementary, taught first grade most of those years, right.
So you're pretty much rooted in that school?
That's right. That's right. There's been a Rhodes in that school for about nearly 70 years, either students or teachers.
Wow.
Two of my daughters-in-law, well, one retired. She taught at Kossuth, and then I have a daughter-in-law who teaches there now.
So tell me about your grandfather.
My great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather. He lived in the western part of the county, near Tippah in Tennessee, right in the corner, northwestern part. And he ran a little country store.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a picture of his little country store with him on the porch.
Wow.
And he had just about everything that you'd want in that little store or need at that time for most people. He had material and just all kinds of pots, pans, overalls, shoes, whatever you needed, and groceries. And he ran this little country store, and he got to loaning money to people. He had some farmland, but then he began to loan money to people, and then at a high interest rate, especially during the Depression. He had money at that time, and he would loan money to different people, and then of course when they couldn't pay, he foreclosed on their farms. They had houses too on their farms, but the houses were not much, but the farmland was very valuable. And he gained quite a bit of property through foreclosure of loans there. So, but in this little country store, he just had so many things, and he couldn't read or write, but he had a knowledge of numbers, he had a knowledge of words stuck in his head. And he was, very, very smart. But he had lots of family gatherings. Here we were with 4 generations of families gathering there. And he had himself had a big family, and each one of those children had big families. We just went on down. And we would gather like holidays, maybe 4th of July or something like that. He'd always have this big wash tub with ice in it and lemonade. And then he'd have, of course, everybody brought food, and we'd have a big table just spread out all over the yard with it just went on and on, seemed like. And of course the kids played, had a good time. We just got to know everybody. And we just grew up like that. And he, in this safe, he had this big safe in the big room of his house. He had a big house, a big farmhouse. And it was fairly modern. He had a carbine lights. They were just little like sconce on the walls, and they were run by carbine. Now that's all I ever remember. And but anyway, he would open up this safe, and in the safe he kept his ledgers and some of his money and notes that he'd had on people, and just different things, in the safe. And he would open that safe up, and when we were all there, and get the silver dollars, lots of silver dollars, and the men would play washers with those silver dollars.
How do you play washers?
They'd dig a hole in the ground and then try to hit that hole with those silver dollars.
Okay.
And then another time I remember Mother telling, I think this was before I was born, that she and Daddy were visiting Big Papa. And he dragged out a $500 bill and showed it to them. And he said, "Now, Fredra, I want you to look at this $500 bill because you'll never have one." So, but anyway, he was very boastful about his money.
Mm-hmm.
And then another time he came by. My cousin and I were visiting my grandmother, and we were there. And Big Papa came through. He had a vehicle of some kind. I can't remember what it was. I guess a truck, because he'd gone to town to get different supplies for his store. And he stopped there. So Bonnie and I were visiting grandmother, and granddaddy, of course. And Big Papa always wanted us to give him a huggy, and he'd always give us money, a nickel.
Mm-hmm.
That was his. So he came by this particular time, and he wanted us to give him a hug. Well, I wouldn't hug his neck because he dipped snuff, and it was running down his chin. And I wouldn't give him a hug. But old Bonnie did. She got that nickel, but I did not get a nickel. So he was Big Papa to us. And as I said, he loved to brag about what he had, his money. And he bought supplies from Abe Rubel, like dry goods, the cloth and things like that, and the overalls from Abe Rubel, which was a big store here in town at that time. And they were Jews, and a very prominent family. And Big Papa would buy supplies from them, and he got to know them real well. So Big Papa goes over at Henry Cemetery and buys him a plot over there for a pretty good sized plot. I think there are already, about 6 people buried there. So it was a big plot at Henry Cemetery, and it was close to the Rubels. He wanted to be buried close to the Rubels because he knew them. And on his tombstone it has J.A. Jones, RFD, which means Route 3, Pocahontas, Tennessee, on it. So he was just really a fascinating person, and we all loved him, but we all just, sometimes we wonder about him and his money. He loved his money more than anything.
So he had a return address on his tombstone?
He had a return address on his tombstone. And the tombstone is huge. It's as big as this table, I guess. So it was big, and the pictures on there.
Tell me about the family get-togethers.
Well, we would...
What would people bring for food?
Oh, fried chicken, pies, cakes, vegetables of all kinds, maybe salads. Usually fried chicken would be the main meat, or maybe ham sometimes. Somebody might fry ham, or something of that, pork chops or something like that. But
And what games would the children play?
We played Red Rover and hide and seek and ring around the roses and drop the handkerchief and.
Do you remember how to play Red Rover?
Oh yeah, I do.
Oh, I have never played it. Tell me about Red Rover.
Okay, usually there are two, a line of kids on one end and then a line of kids several feet apart, yards apart, and then you would, one would call, Red Rover, let Michael come over, and because we'd be all holding hands, and that Michael would try to break through. And if he broke through those hands, he'd have to go back. He'd take somebody and go back to his side of the game there.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went back and forth.
Were these mostly holidays that you do this, or birthdays? Or?
Mostly holidays or birthdays. Could be birthdays, either one.
Mm-hmm.
But usually, usually most of the time we got together when it was cooler. Now, when it was cooler or when it was warm, not in the wintertime. We didn't get together in the wintertime, but usually spring or...
The house you grew up in, did it have electricity?
No, it did not. I was, let me think how old I was. I think I was about 12, maybe 11 or 12 when we got electricity.
Mm-hmm. How about indoor plumbing?
We had not for a long time, but we had... and the only water, we had running water in the kitchen,
mm-hmm.
and that was all.
An outhouse?
We did have an outhouse. Now, my grandparents, my grandmother and granddaddy Brooks, had a Delco battery, and they had electricity practically all my life, ran off of that battery.
Mm-hmm.
And they had an indoor bathroom that he had a big tank on the back, a huge tank. It was not quite as big as this room, but pretty big, and that supplied the water to go to the bathroom.
And phone service? Did you have?
Oh, I didn't have a telephone until I was in college. None of my...
Not even a party line?
Not even a party line.
Was it you that was telling the story about the homemade school bus?
Was telling, I rode one time. My mother, as I said, taught school.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I went with her, and I think I started school when I was about 4, something like that. But then 4 and 5, but I went to another school and I rode with the school teacher to school when I was in the 1st grade. And then my mother taught. Then I went with my mother 2nd and 3rd grade. And then I went to another school, and I began riding the school bus then, a regular school bus.
A regular school bus.
Regular school bus.
Okay. Were you here when Elvis came to town?
I was here, as I said yesterday, my husband, or then my boyfriend, we were in the 12th grade. And when Elvis came, I wanted to come too, but he said, no, that's no place for you to go to the courthouse to see Elvis.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't imagine there were very few girls here.
Was it too shocking?
I guess. I guess so.
What other events in Corinth history stick out in your mind? And I don't mean the Civil War. I mean just things that have happened.
Okay, I remember I was mentioning Abe Rubel.
Mm-hmm.
It was, let's see, how many floors did it have? I think it had about 3 floors plus the basement. Mm-hmm. It was a huge, it was just like, to me, it would be like going to New York, I guess. It had a doorman.
Wow.
He was dressed up in his suit. I mean, not a regular suit, but like a wedding suit, tux, I'm trying to say. He was dressed up, and he was a doorman. And you went in the store, and you would purchase. My mother bought material. She sewed. I hardly ever had a bought dress until I was teenager. She sewed, and she bought material there, and they would put it in a little basket and put your money in a little cup like thing and seal it up, and then send that little basket up to the second floor where the bookkeeper was. And they would put your material in a bag, and then if you needed any change, they'd send that back on that and in that little basket thing. And so that's what I remember there. But then the most exciting thing at all was Christmas there. Oh, that store was decorated to no end. And you walked up the stairs, and at the very top of the stairs was Santa Claus. And all kinds of toys and just everything that a child could ever want. And that was my favorite time to go there.
Where was the store exactly?
Do you know where the clock is? Have y'all seen the clock on Fillmore? Fillmore and Cruz, I think, Fillmore. Okay, it was right across the street. They tore it down and built this little old, it's a cream color brick now. But it was just so fascinating to go there. And then out in the display, at Christmas time, they would have Santa Claus, and he'd be doing all kinds of movements. Big, huge Santa Claus out in the window display.
If I could ask, you were a teacher for decades.
Well, 29 years.
Almost 3 decades. And you taught elementary school?
I taught elementary.
Okay. Tell me about the integration of schools here. How did that go in Corinth?
Well, I think it went rather smoothly. My husband and I had been gone when it first started, really. But when I came back, when I first came back, when we first moved back here, I taught at East Corinth. And we had maybe 1 or 2 in that school, which was first through 6th grade. I don't know how many children were there, but maybe we had 1 or 2 in each class. I don't remember. And then I think in the summertime with Head Start, they began taking children out into the country schools, would have Head Start, and they began to take the blacks out that way in the summer.
And there were no particular issues here?
No, none at all, as I know of. Okay. Now, when the first year with it, we moved back here from. That we moved back. We had, after I taught those 2 years, a year in Corinth, we moved to Kossuth, and my oldest son was in the 3rd grade, and I think that was the first time they had any blacks there at that time.
Shifting gears a little bit, Borums.
Borums.
Tell me about your perception of Borums as the center of life here in town sometimes.
Well, everybody just drawn there. I don't know why. They just are drawn there. Now, when I was growing up, of course, it was just a drugstore to us with a soda fountain, and that was I don't remember ever going when I was growing up there.
It moved out of downtown for a while? Is that right?
I don't know.
Okay.
I've always known it just being where it is now, so I don't know.
It's quite the place. Downtown seems to be making a nice comeback.
It is. It is. Everything moved out for a while. Walmart came, but it's more lively here downtown, and then Suco or the Wick Street is really coming out too. So.
Now you're a member of the Genealogical Society.
Yes. I've been a charter member.
And tell me why that's important to a town like this.
So many people, just want to find out about their family. This man, in fact, I sat on the telephone with him this morning for a long time. In fact, he calls quite a bit. He's a black man. He lives in Jackson, and I think he's maybe homebound but he loves to do genealogy. And I was looking up some educable children for him, and we found those, and he just thought he'd hit a pot of gold. And
This town, the people we've met here, seem more interested in their history and the history of the place than just about anywhere I've ever been. Do you think that's related in any way to the Civil War?
I think so. I think a lot of it is.
Yeah.
My middle son, John, was in the army got in the army with the ROTC. Had gone to ROTC, and he went to Germany. Hey. He went to Germany, and he was stationed in Germany. And while he was there, they found out that he was from this area and close to Shallow.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, everybody thought, well, that's just like being near Washington, D.C. to them. So, but John got, of course, he'd always been to Shallow, just to Shallow. We'd go to Shallow on picnics, and we'd go school trips and all of that. And he was just used to going, it wasn't anything big to him in a way because we'd just grown up here. But John got interested. In fact, some of the others got interested in going to some of the art shows, and they were buying Civil War exhibits or Civil War paintings, and he got interested in that. And I don't know how many Civil War paintings he and I both have. So, it's just just grew up here, and that you don't think about it until somebody really gets interested in it too, and then you begin to get interested in it.
It's amazing because to us, this area in Shiloh, I mean, it's just fascinating to actually be here. And,
Yeah.
The town and the actual battlefield. I mean, it's funny to hear you say that. It's just
been here.
Yeah, it's just been here. When, I guess, as you were growing up, I mean, when did you really first start to realize, I guess, the significance of the area that you're in and the history of it?
Well, I don't guess I really realized it until maybe I was college. Like I had even, grew up going to Shallow. We'd go on picnics and family gatherings up there. And we'd go to Shallow and to Pickwick. I was telling my children last week we had gone up that way to eat. And I said, well, we used to come and we'd dress up. We'd wear our Sunday clothes to go on a picnic at Shallow. And
that was the world.
That's it. And they would have big singings, and my grandmother Brooks loved singings up that way. And we'd go up there and spend the day at Shallow.
Tell me about a singing.
The singings, well, they just have to get together, and they would get together and have these different musicians and different people would gather at churches or schools, old schools, the one-room schools, and have singings. People from everywhere would come.
Would it be religious music?
Oh yeah. Nothing else. Now the ones I went to, I guess they had some other places too. But the ones I went to, they were big singings.
Revival meeting, like, in a way.
Right. Have big revival meetings. People would come to the revivals, and I mean, people would just be, of course we had no air conditioning. The windows were all raised, and the churches, and people would be sitting in the windows and standing outside. Now some of them may be drunk outside, but they'd still be coming to the revivals.
Standing, maybe.
It was the only place they could go.
Did they ever have a Chautauqua here?
Now what would that be?
That answered the question, no. That's a non-religious revival meeting, I think. Back long ago, they were more lectures and educational things, but they were held in tents. There was a society, and they traveled around a lot of places, and people would lecture about going to Africa.
No, I never heard of that.
But good religious revival meetings.
Right.
We'd have quite a few.
Now we did have tent revivals. We would have tent revivals or arbor. They would just be outside, and maybe they were called bush arbor revivals.
Would those be local ministers, or would they be
They would
people
be,
who
mostly.
travel?
Mostly.
Okay.
Now, there's one church I know that it's Campground Methodist Church. It's in Tippah County. And the reason it's campground, people would come from miles and miles around and stay for several days and camp there and have meetings, revival meetings.
Were they fun?
Well, now, I never did go to one of those. I don't know.
What about other revival meetings? Were they fun?
Well, I enjoyed them because that was, you got to gather with, of course, my family were all right there anyway, but you got to know other people or be around other people, and that was just a good place to go.
Were they social meetings?
Yes, some of them were.
Okay.
Do you know who Shelby Foote is?
I don't.
Yeah. Okay. He Civil War author, wrote huge volumes of literature about the war, and he was based in Memphis and
Oh, okay.
the Shiloh battlefield and
Uh-huh,
everything. So we know Elvis came to town. Are there other people that may have come to town? Other significant?
Let me see. I was trying to think. Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis. Now, I never did come to see any of these now because that was not. My parents wouldn't have let me anyway.
Did they perform here?
They did at the courthouse. They all performed at the courthouse.
Outside?
Well, no, I don't know. I guess they were. I don't know. I remember people say, I don't know where they performed.
the courthouse, which we're sitting in right now.
Right. I think they would be probably upstairs, maybe in the little foyer like up on the second floor. And I think that's probably where they would be. I don't know. I never did get here. My parents were pretty strict on me too. And not real strict, but you know.
As people were.
Right. And I didn't get to do a lot. Well, we didn't do a lot of things, the people that I grew up with. You know.
Play Red Rover.
Well, but we did play Red Rover. We didn't dance, because that was a no. And, you know, you just didn't. Now, we played, and my mother and daddy and I and my cousins, we played Monopoly, Rook, Authors, Scrabble, you know, things like that. But as far as other stuff, we didn't do.
You read real books on that?
We read real books. We did. My grandmother, granddaddy had a fairly sized, good library. And my mother saw that I checked out library books at the library. And I read several summers. Was in a library program at the library here.
Okay.
And then at the end of summer, we'd have a big picnic then.
Any other stories you'd like to share?
Oh, I can't think of anything right now.
If you don't mind, I'm going to turn the camera off.
Okay, that's great.
Again,
I think I've rambled on enough.
This was all done with your permission, is that right?
That's right. It's
Okay, thank you very much.
I've rambled on enough.